Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. In our previous class, we heard 3 different episodes. We heard how Krishna defeated all the competitors who were fighting on behalf of Shishupal, headed by Jarasandha. And Balaram headed up the army and defeated all the other princes who tried to rescue Rukmini from Krishna's chariot. And we heard how Rukmi went out and chased Krishna when he saw that nobody could rescue Rukmini. Jarasandha and everybody came back and told Shishupal, it's just your bad luck. That happens to all of us. Rukmi said, no, I cannot let my sister be taken by this Krishna. So Rukmi made a vow that he would not return until he rescued his sister. But of course, Krishna defeated Rukmi, and when Krishna was about to kill Rukmi with his sword, Rukmini, she fell down at Krishna's feet and she begged Krishna, no, 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 no. My brother, even though he thought he was doing the right thing, so on my auspicious marriage day, please do not kill my brother. So this is where we pick up. Balaram will now enter at this point. So Rukmi has been tied up and Krishna has disfigured him, snipped him, his hair to make him look odd looking. So at this point, Balaram appears. So this episode is called Balaram, the original spiritual master. While Krishna was dealing with Rukmi in this way, the soldiers of the Yadu dynasty, commanded by Balaram himself, broke the whole strength of Rukmi's army, just as an elephant in a tank discards the feeble stem of a lotus flower. In other words, as an elephant breaks the whole construction of a lotus flower while bathing in a reservoir of water, the military strength of the Yadus broke up Rukmi's forces. When the commanders of the Yadu dynasty came back to see Krishna, they were all surprised to see the condition of Rukmi. Lord Balaram then became especially compassionate for his sister-in-law, who was newly married to his brother. To please Rukmini, Balaram personally untied Rukmi, and to further please Rukmini, Balaram, as the elder brother of Krishna, spoke some words of chastisement. Krishna, your action is not at all satisfactory. This is an abomination, very much contrary to our family tradition. To cut someone's hair and shave his mustache and beard is almost comparable to killing him. Now, whatever Rukmi might have been, Rukmi is now our brother-in-law. He is now a relative of our family. So you should not have put Rukmi in such a condition. After this, to pacify Rukmini, Lord Balaram spoke to her. You should not be sorry that your brother has been made odd-looking, for everyone suffers or enjoys the results of his or her own actions. Lord Balaram wanted to impress upon Rukmini that she should not have been sorry for the consequences her brother suffered due to his actions. There was no need of being too affectionate towards such a brother. Then Lord Balaram again turned towards Krishna and said, "And so, my dear Krishna, a relative, even though one commits such a blunder and deserves to be killed, should be excused. For when such a relative is conscious of one's own fault, that consciousness itself is like death. So there is no need to kill Rukmini." Balaram again turned toward Rukmini, informing her that the current duty of the Kshatriya in human society is so fixed that according to the principles of fighting, one's own brother may become an enemy. In such an instance, a Kshatriya does not hesitate to kill one's own brother. In other words, Lord Balaram wanted to instruct Rukmini that Rukmini and Krishna were right in not showing mercy to each other while fighting, despite the family consideration that they happen to be now brothers-in-law. Sri Balaram informed Rukmini that Kshatriyas are typical emblems of the materialistic way of life, for they become puffed up whenever there is a question of material acquisition. Therefore, when there is a fight between two belligerent Kshatriyas for kingdom, land, wealth, women, prestige, or power, they try to put one another into the most abominable condition. Balaram instructed Rukmini that her affection towards her brother, Rukmi, who had created enmity with so many people, was a perverse consideration befitting an ordinary materialist. Rukmini's brother's character was not at all admirable, considering his treatment towards other friends, and yet Rukmini, displaying herself as if an ordinary woman, was affectionate towards Rukmi. Actually, Rukmi was not fit to be Rukmini's brother, but still Rukmini was lenient toward Rukmi. Balaram thus continued speaking. Besides that, the consideration that a person is neutral or is one's friend or enemy is generally made by persons who are in the bodily concept of life. Such foolish persons are bewildered by the illusory energy of the Supreme Lord. The spirit soul is of the same pure quality in any embodiment of matter. But those who are not sufficiently intelligent see only the bodily differences between animals and men, literates and illiterates, rich and poor. But all of these considerations cover the pure spirit soul. Such differences, observed merely on the basis of the body, are exactly like the differences between fires in terms of the various types of fuel they consume. Whatever the size and shape of the fuel, there is no such variety of size and shape in the fire which comes out. Similarly, in the sky, there are no differences in size or shape. And so, in this way, Balaram reconciled the situation by his moral and ethical instructions to Rukmini and Krishna. And once again, to Rukmini, Balaram spoke further. This body is a part of the material manifestation, consisting of material elements, living conditions, and the interactions of the three modes of material nature. The living entity or spirit soul, being in contact with these, is transmigrating from one body to another, due only to illusory enjoyment, and that transmigration is known as material existence. This contact of the living entity with the material manifestation has neither integration nor disintegration. Oh, my dear chaste sister-in-law, the spirit soul is, of course, the cause of this material body, just as the sun is the cause of sunlight, eyesight, and the forms of material manifestation. The example of the sunshine and the material manifestation is very appropriate in understanding the living entity's contact with the material world. In the morning, the sun rises, and the heat and light gradually expand throughout the whole day. The sun is the cause of material shapes and forms, for it is due to the sun that integration and disintegration of material elements takes place. But as soon as the sun sets, the whole manifestation is no longer connected to the sun, which has passed from one place to another. When the sun passes from the eastern to the western hemisphere, the results of the interactions due to the sunshine in the eastern hemisphere remain, but the sunshine itself is visible in the western hemisphere. Similarly, the living entity accepts or produces different bodies and different bodily relationships in a particular circumstance. But as soon as he or she gives up the present body and accepts another, one has nothing to do with the former body. Similarly, the living entity has nothing to do with the next body he or she accepts, for one is always free from the contact of this bodily contamination. Therefore, the appearance and disappearance of the body have nothing to do with the living entity, just as the waxing and waning of the moon have nothing to do with the moon. For when the moon waxes, we falsely think that the moon is developing, and when the moon wanes, we think that the moon is decreasing. Factually, the moon, as it is always the same. It has nothing to do with such visible activities of waxing and waning. One's consciousness in material existence can be compared to sleeping and dreaming. When a man sleeps, he dreams of many non-factual happenings, and as a result of dreaming, he becomes subject to different kinds of happiness and distress. Similarly, when a person is in the dream of material consciousness, he or she suffers the effects of accepting a body and giving it up again in material existence. But opposite to this material consciousness is Krishna consciousness. In other words, when a man is elevated to the platform of Krishna consciousness, he becomes free from this false conception of life. In this way, Sri Balaram instructed Rukmini in spiritual knowledge. Balaram further addressed his sister-in-law in this way: "O sweet smiling Rukmini, Do not be aggrieved by false notions caused by ignorance. Only because of false notions does one become unhappy. But one can immediately remove this unhappiness by discussing the philosophy of actual life. So you should be happy on that platform only. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Next episode, Rukmi keeps his promise. After hearing such enlightening instructions from Sri Balaram, Rukmini immediately became pacified and happy and adjusted her mind, which was very much afflicted by the degraded position of her brother Rukmi. As far as Rukmi was concerned, his promise was unfulfilled, but nor was Rukmi's mission successful. Rukmi had come from home with his soldiers and military phalanx to defeat Krishna and release his sister. But on the contrary, Rukmi lost all his soldiers and military strength. Rukmi was personally degraded and became very sorry. But by the grace of Lord Krishna, Rukmi would continue his life to its fixed destination. Because Rukmi was a Kshatriya, he could remember his promise that he would not return to his capital city, Kundina, without killing Krishna and releasing his sister. But Rukmi had failed to do this. Therefore, Rukmi decided in anger not to return to his capital city, and thus Rukmi constructed a small cottage in the village known as Bhojakata, where Rukmi resided for the rest of his life. And then we have one more little episode for today, aptly entitled, Krishna Marries Rukmini. So we're coming to the conclusion. So after defeating all the opposing elements and forcibly carrying away Rukmini, Krishna brought Rukmini to his capital city, Dwaraka. And then Krishna married Rukmini according to the Vedic ritualistic principle. After this marriage, Krishna became the king of the Yadus at Dwaraka. And on the occasion of Krishna's marriage with Rukmini, all the inhabitants became very happy. And in every house there were great ceremonies. The inhabitants of Dwaraka city were so pleased that they dressed themselves with the nicest possible ornaments and garments, and went to present gifts according to their means to the newly married couple, Krishna and Rukmini. All the houses of Yadupuri, Dwaraka, were decorated with flags, festoons, and flowers. Each and every house had an extra gate specifically prepared for this occasion, and on both sides of the gate were big water jugs filled with water. The whole city of Dwaraka was made fragrant by the burning of fine incense, and at night there was the illumination from thousands of lamps which decorated every building. The entire city appeared jubilant on the occasion of Lord Krishna's marriage with Rukmini. Everywhere in the city there were profuse decorations of banana trees and betel nut trees, since these two trees are considered very auspicious in happy ceremonies. At the same time, there was an assembly of many elephants who carried the respective kings of different friendly kingdoms. It is the habit of the elephant that whenever he sees some small plants and trees, out of the elephant's sportive and frivolous nature, the elephant uproots the trees, throwing them hither and thither. The elephants assembled on this occasion also scattered the banana and betel nut trees. But in spite of such intoxicated action, the whole city of Dwaraka, with the trees thrown here and there, looked very nice. The friendly kings of the Kurus and the Pandavas were represented by Bhishma, Dhritarashtra, the 5 Pandava brothers, King Drupada, King Santardana, and Rukmini's father, Bhishmaka. Because of Krishna's kidnapping Rukmini, initially there was some misunderstanding between the two families. But King Bhishmaka, king of Vidarbha, being approached by Sri Balaram and persuaded by many saintly persons, was ultimately induced to participate in the marriage ceremony of Krishna and Rukmini. Although the incident of the kidnapping was not a very happy occurrence in the kingdom of Vidarbha, still, kidnapping was not an unusual affair among Kshatriyas. In fact, kidnapping was current in almost all Kshatriya marriages. Anyway, King Bhishmaka was from the very beginning inclined to hand over his beautiful daughter to Krishna. So, in one way or another, Bhishmaka's purpose had been served, and so he was pleased to join the marriage ceremony, even though his eldest son, Rukmi, was degraded in the fight. Now, it is mentioned in the Padma Purana that Maharaj Nanda and the cowherder boys of Vrindavan also joined the marriage ceremony. Kings of the kingdoms of Kuru, Srinjai, Kekai, Vidarbha, and Kunti all came to Dwaraka on this occasion and met with one another very joyfully. The story of Rukmini's being kidnapped by Krishna was thus poeticized, and professional readers recited it everywhere. All the assembled kings and their daughters especially were struck with wonder and very much pleased upon hearing the chivalrous activities of Krishna. In this way, all the visitors, as well as the inhabitants of Dwaraka city, were joyful to see Krishna and Rukmini together. In other words, the Supreme Lord, whose name is Janardana, the maintainer of everyone, and the goddess of fortune, Rukmini, were thus united, and all the people felt extremely jubilant. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.